Booth Parker, and today on the 12 Days of Christmas Cooking, we are going to make a peppermint bark cheesecake. So a few years ago, I was playing in the kitchen at Christmas time. I love cheesecake and I love peppermint bark, and I just kind of mixed the two together to come up with this yummy, very Christmas inspired creation. Now this is a little more labor intensive than a few of the other things we have made in this series, but it is worth it. So what you need are 12 Oreos, 4 full sheets of graham crackers. If you can find the chocolate ones, that's even better. We're gonna have 2 tablespoons of butter that we will melt, 12 squares of the Ghirardelli dark chocolate peppermint bark squares, 18 mini candy canes, 4 eggs, 4 8-ounce blocks of cream cheese softened, 1 cup of sugar, a teaspoon of peppermint extract, and a teaspoon of red food coloring. This is optional. I know some people don't like to do coloring. Now, there's 2 ways you can make this cheesecake. You can do the traditional way using, a springform pan and doing a full cheesecake. I actually prefer to do little mini cheesecakes in a muffin pan because you can set them out and everybody has their own little individual cheesecake. Don't have to be cutting and slicing, and this recipe freezes really well, and you can individually wrap each one in foil, pop them in a freezer bag and have them in the freezer. You can take them right out of the freezer and eat them right away. You don't even have to wait for them to thaw. If you choose to do the individuals, do line the muffin pans with parchment paper, kind of like you would for cupcakes or muffins. And the cooking adjustments are noted in the linked recipe. So now it's time to get started making this yummy Christmas dessert. So the very first thing that we want to do is crush both the peppermint bark squares and the candy canes. I simply just put them in a Ziploc bag and take a meat mallet and crush them. The peppermint bark crushes really well. Don't do it too hard. The bag may pop if there's too much air in it. So that's pretty easy to do. And then we'll do the candy canes. You can do this part in a food processor, but just be careful not to get it too finely crushed. You don't want it like a powder. You still want it to have some chunks in it. Okay, so now that that's finished, let's move on to the next step. The next thing we want to do is make the crust. So you're going to make the crust and actually bake it on its own for a few minutes before you make the actual cheesecake part and pour it into the pan. So to make the crust, we're going to take the 4 full graham cracker sheets and the 12 Oreos. We're going to put those in a food processor because this part you do want really, really fine, almost to a powder. Okay. It's not quite as fine. Do it just a little bit more. Okay, so it looks nice and fine. We're going to take these crumbs and pour them into this mixing bowl. Okay. Be very careful of the very sharp blade in your food processor. So we're going to take the crumbs and then I'm going to melt the butter and add it to the crumbs and mix it together. So here I have the melted butter. I'm just gonna pour it right in, kind of evenly over everything. And then I'm just going to mix this up to get the crumbs fairly moist. Gotta mix it pretty well because you don't want this to be clumpy. So mix it really, really thoroughly until it's even without the clumps in it from the butter. So just want to make sure all the crumbs get good and moist, but you don't want them kind of saturated with butter because that's when it clumps. So you want to get that nice, keep that nice crumbly, powdery feel. Okay, so if you were going to make the full cheesecake, you would take your springform pan and you would want to make sure it is together. That is key. So you put your springform pan together and you would pour the crumb mixture into the bottom and press it really, really firm up to the sides and getting it up the edges just a little bit, but not a whole lot. We are actually going to do the individual ones. So you'll have 24 to 30 when you do this. So you're just going to take your muffin pan and line it with parchment paper. Of course, you can do really cute ones if you want to. I just have some plain ones here. So we're just going to line it with parchment paper, and then we're going to take the crumb mixture and press it just into the bottom of each of these. So just take a little bit, drop it in, and press it down into the bottom good, and just keep right on going all the way around until you have all of them complete. Okay, so I have all my crusts ready to go in the oven. They are going to go into an oven preheated to 325, and they are going to cook for about 5 or 6 minutes. If you're doing the whole cheesecake, it needs to cook for about 10 minutes, so a little bit different cooking times when you're doing the small ones. So I'm gonna pop these in the oven and get the rest prepped to make. Okay, so now it is time to actually make the cream cheese mixture. So we've got the 4 blocks, 8-ounce blocks of cream cheese that have been softened. You may have to scrape a little off the foil. It tends to do that when it's softened. So we're going to get all 4 of these in the mixer. And you can use a handheld mixer if you like. I tend to like the countertop one for the cheesecakes. All right, so there we go. Don't want to miss any, all of it there. And the next thing we're going to do is add the sugar. So it's 1 cup of sugar. This is a 1/2 cup scoop. And just going to pour it right in here. And we are going to get this creaming together. And it'll take it a minute to get thoroughly creamed through. Probably need to turn it up to 2 or 3 and stop it at one point and kind of scoop the bottom and make sure the cream cheese isn't stuck on the bottom and not getting mixed up in there. And then turn it back on and let it mix a little bit more. So this is mixed to a nice kind of almost a fluffy consistency, very well mixed through. Now I'm going to turn the mixer back on, but on a low speed, and slowly add in the eggs, about 1 at a time. And then I will add the 1 teaspoon of peppermint extract and the 1 teaspoon of red food coloring. So I'm just gonna add these in 1 at a time so that they get blended in really well. I'm gonna bump it just a notch making sure it gets everything off the sides. The cream cheese is kind of sticky and thick, so it tends to hold to the side of the bowl, so you've got to make sure it's getting into the actual mixture. Okay, so there are the eggs going, and I am going to do the 1 teaspoon of peppermint extract. And then the 1 teaspoon of food coloring. Be very careful with the food coloring. It'll turn everything red. So try to pour it in nice and slowly so that it doesn't slosh anywhere. Okay, so that is in. And I am actually going to turn the mixer off and scrape the sides because I can see there's a little bit still sticking, and turn it back on low speed again just to get everything mixed well. So you can see how some of it is sticking a little. It's sticking here on the side. So you want to make sure you get all of that pulled down into the bowl so it doesn't get stuck on the sides and not blended. And definitely kind of scoop the bottom. The cream cheese likes to hang out down there as well sometimes. And then scrape your spatula really well to get everything off of it and back into the bowl. And then we're going to turn this back on for just a minute. Okay. So you want to make sure it's not lumpy because then your cheesecake will be lumpy. So you just want to make sure it's nice and finely blended together. So I have my cream cheese mixture. It's all nice and smooth and blended well. And I've got my crust that have been pre-baked. Next, I'm going to take the crushed candy canes and sprinkle them over the crust. Try to make it kind of even so it's not all bunched up in the middle. Just sprinkle it all around. Really gives a good peppermint flavor. The candy canes pretty much melt while they bake, so they're not really crunchy anymore, but they really give great flavor to the cheesecake. One thing that's really fun to do with the mini ones is to do a little garnish on them at the end. I found some little snowmen peppermint barks, and I just kind of stand them up in the center. Really cute. You can also stick a whole candy cane or even a broken piece of peppermint bark kind of wedged in the top. So it just makes it really fun and festive. Okay, so now that all the crusts have their little candy cane sprinkles on top, we are going to put the cream cheese mixture in. So this actually goes in 2 parts. We're going to do a small spoonful that fills up almost halfway, and then we will sprinkle the crushed peppermint bark, crushed peppermint bark, and then we will do another topping of the cream cheese mixture on top of that. So you want to get a cookie scoop or a small ladle or something like that. Since this is so wet, it definitely helps with scooping it out. So you want to get your mixture, do about halfway, just kind of go around. This is a extra large cookie scoop, so I'm not filling it up all the way because it would be too much for just filling half. And I'm just going to go around and fill all these halfway. So I have all these halfway full. I'm going to take the crushed peppermint bark squares and just kind of sprinkle them like a little layer here. Some of these pieces are kind of big, so I'm just going to kind of lay them out. A little coverage. Don't need a ton of it. Just go around and sprinkling. Creates a nice little layer when it bakes. When you make the whole pie, when you cut it, it's fun to see the layer of the peppermint bark in the middle. So I'm just going to go around and do this to all of these. Now that I have the peppermint bark squares sprinkled over the cream cheese mixture, I'm going to add the rest of the cream cheese mixture to the top, wanting to fill these almost full. So be careful not to overfill them. And it will level out when it cooks. A little bit more in that one. I'm just going to go around and top all of these with a little more of the cream cheese mixture, and then they will be ready to bake. These are now ready to bake. They will go into an oven at 325, and the full cheesecake, if you did the full cheesecake, it takes about 55 to 60 minutes to cook. These take 25, maybe 30 minutes. The key with the cheesecake is you want to keep your eye on it until it appears to be set. And what I mean by that is that the center doesn't look real wet and jiggly. Because if it is, that means the middle is not cooked through. So you just want to kind of keep your eye on it. You can kind of shake the pan and see if it's still wiggling. And if it's still wiggling a lot, it's not set yet. So that's just a little tip for keeping an eye on these while they bake.